In 330 BC, Alexander the Great conquered Persia in less than 4 years. Then he reached Afghanistan, and it took him 3 more years just to cross it. By the time he left, his army was wrecked. He had married a local warlord's daughter just to buy peace, and the country was already slipping out of his control before he was even gone. 2,350 years later, the most powerful military force in human history landed in the same country. The United States, after 20 years, $2 trillion spent, and roughly 2,400 American soldiers dead, left Afghanistan in August of 2021. The same group they had invaded to destroy was back in power within 10 days. Between Alexander and the Americans, this exact piece of land defeated the Mongols, broke 3 British armies, and bled out the Soviet Union, which collapsed 2 years after withdrawing. It is the only country on Earth with a single nickname that every history book uses: the Graveyard of Empires. Here's the strange part. Afghanistan is landlocked. It has no oil pipeline to the sea. Its army is small. Its population is poor. It has no nuclear weapons. By every standard measurement of national power, it should be one of the easiest places on Earth to conquer. But it isn't. And the reason has almost nothing to do with the Afghans themselves. It has to do with the rocks underneath their feet. Why is Afghanistan geographically impossible to conquer? I'm Arthur, and this is the geography no one talks about. Let's start with where this country actually is. Afghanistan sits at the exact center of Asia. 6 countries touch its borders: Iran in the west, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan in the north, China in a tiny sliver in the east, and Pakistan curving around the south. It covers 652,000 square kilometers, which is roughly the size of Texas, and it has 0 kilometers of coastline. If you were designing the worst possible country to invade, you would probably draw Afghanistan. 3 of the 4 most violent mountain ranges in Asia meet inside it: the Hindu Kush, which carries the western tail of the Himalayas, the Pamirs in the northeast, and the Suleiman Range in the south. Together, they shove 3/4 of Afghanistan's land above 600 meters in elevation. The highest peak, Noshak, hits 7,492 meters. That is taller than the tallest mountain in the entire continental United States. And here's the key: those mountains do not run in one direction, they twist. The Hindu Kush bends in a giant arc across the middle of the country. Side ranges fork off in every direction. The result is a country shaped like a maze. There are isolated valleys that touch each other on the map, but are completely cut off from each other on the ground, separated by 12,000-foot ridges. There are exactly 30 meaningful mountain passes that connect Afghanistan to the outside world. 30. For a country roughly 20 times the size of Belgium, and every single one of them is a death trap. The most famous is the Khyber Pass on the border with Pakistan. 40 kilometers long, narrows down to 15 meters wide in some places, with cliffs 800 meters above on either side. The British Army marched through the Khyber 4 times in the 1800s. 3 of those times, they were massacred. In January of 1842, an entire British column of 16,000 soldiers and civilians retreated through the passes from Kabul. 1 man made it to safety. 1. And here's where geography gets weird. The Khyber isn't even the worst pass in Afghanistan. It's just the most famous. The Salang Pass in the north, the Khyber Pass in the center, the Kawak Pass that Alexander himself used. They are all narrower, all colder, all easier to ambush. If you control 500 fighters and you control 1 pass, you can bleed out an army of 100,000. That is not an exaggeration. That is the actual math of mountain warfare. If you've ever watched something break a much larger thing it shouldn't be able to break, helps this video reach more people. That's all the CTA I'll do. Now let's go deeper into the geology, because the geography we're talking about isn't accidental. It's the result of one of the most violent collisions still happening on Earth right now. 50 million years ago, the Indian subcontinent broke off from Africa and started drifting north. At about 90 million years ago, it was a wide tropical sea between India and Asia. By 40 million years ago, it wasn't. The Indian plate had slammed into the Eurasian plate, and the crust got crumpled the way you'd crumple a sheet of paper if you pushed it from both ends. The Himalayas are what happened in the middle. The Hindu Kush, the Karakoram, and the Pamirs are what happened on the western edge. Afghanistan is where the impact zone bent and shattered. That is why the mountains run in such weird directions. They're not one range. They are the wreckage of three plates grinding past each other, and the plates are still moving today. India is shoving north at about 40 millimeters a year. The Pamirs are still rising. Afghanistan still gets earthquakes that flatten entire valleys. But here's the part most people miss. The geology didn't just build mountains, it buried something underneath them. In 2010, a United States Geological Survey discovered that Afghanistan sits on top of nearly $1 trillion worth of mineral wealth. Lithium, cobalt, copper, rare earths, the building blocks of every modern battery and every modern smartphone. And almost none of it can be extracted because the geography that built those minerals also makes it impossible to build a road to them, hold the road, defend a mine, or ship anything out. Even Afghanistan's wealth is locked behind its own geography. This brings us to the question that has confused historians for 2.5 millennia. Why has no empire ever held this country? Let me show you the list. In 330 BC, Alexander spent 3 years trying to subdue Bactria, which is the area around modern-day Mazar-e-Sharif. He won the battles. He never won the country. He left, and the local rulers immediately rose up. In 1219, Genghis Khan invaded. The Mongols were arguably the most effective military force in history. They burned cities, killed everyone in Herat, leveled Balkh, but they could not garrison Afghanistan. The Mongol Empire ruled almost all of Asia except for the high valleys of the Hindu Kush. In the 1500s, the Mughal Empire pushed up from India. They held Kandahar for 50 years, then lost it. Held Kabul, then lost it. Their power ended where the mountains began. In 1839, the British marched in to install a puppet king. By 1842, they were retreating in the worst military disaster in British imperial history. They came back twice more. They failed twice more. In December of 1979, the Soviet Union sent in 100,000 troops with full air support, modern artillery, and helicopter gunships, expecting to wrap things up in 6 months. They left 10 years later. 15,000 Soviet soldiers dead, 40,000 wounded, and the war contributed directly to the collapse of the Soviet Union itself. And then the United States, the most powerful military in human history. 20 years of occupation, $2 trillion, air superiority on day one and for every day after. The strongest intelligence apparatus that has ever existed, withdrew in August of 2021. The Taliban was back in Kabul before the last American plane took off from Bagram. 6 empires, 6 failures, 23 centuries. How many of you had heard the phrase graveyard of empires before? I'd genuinely like to know in the comments where you first heard it. Now here's what nobody really explains in those history documentaries. Why? Why does this exact piece of land keep doing this? The answer is that Afghanistan's geography stops invading armies in 5 very specific ways, and you can't fix any of them by being a bigger army. First, you cannot supply an army in Afghanistan. There are no rivers big enough to ship anything. There is no port because there is no sea. There are essentially no railways. Every bullet, every gallon of fuel, every meal an invading soldier eats has to come in over the same mountain passes that the defenders are sitting on top of. Soviet supply convoys to Kabul lost up to a quarter of their fuel just to ambushes on the Salang Pass. Second, you cannot consolidate control of the population because there is no population. There are populations, plural. Afghanistan has at least 14 recognized ethnic groups: Pashtuns, Tajiks, Hazaras, Uzbeks, Imaks, Turkmens, Baluch, Nuristani, and so on. They live separated by mountains that block roads, marriage, and language. If you bribe a Pashtun tribal leader, you've made an enemy of his Tajik rival in the next valley. If you arm the Tajiks, you push the Hazaras toward Iran. The country is geographically designed to splinter the moment you try to unify it. Third, you cannot win a decisive battle because there's no capital that controls the country. Kabul is the official capital, but it sits in one valley out of dozens. You can take Kabul in a week. You will then spend 20 years failing to take everything else. Fourth, every Afghan fighter has terrain advantage that no foreigner can match. Local people grew up on these passes. They know which gully connects to which valley. They know which spring still flows in October. An American Special Forces team carries thermal optics, advanced satellite communications, and the best weapons on Earth. A Pashtun fighter from Paktia knows the exact rock outcropping where he can sit invisibly for 6 hours and shoot the lead vehicle in a convoy. Geography flatters local knowledge and punishes foreign technology. Fifth, and this one almost no one talks about, Afghanistan has safe haven borders. Defeated insurgents can melt into the tribal areas of Pakistan or eastern Iran, rearm, recruit, and return. The Soviets had this problem. The Americans had this problem. No invading army has ever been able to seal the Durand Line, the colonial border between Pakistan and Afghanistan, because the mountains on the Pakistani side are just as bad as the mountains on the Afghan side. Geography doesn't respect international law. Add those 5 factors together, and you get the same outcome every time. Empires can conquer Afghanistan. Empires cannot hold Afghanistan. The geography does the work. And here's where the map tells a different story. The same geography that defeats every invader also keeps Afghanistan itself trapped. Because of the mountains, Afghanistan has no easy access to the sea. Its closest major port is Karachi in Pakistan, almost 1,000 kilometers away by a road that crosses the Khyber. Every export, every import, every drop of oil goes through territory it does not control. Iran offers an alternative through Chabahar, but Iran is under sanctions, so the route barely functions. This is why Afghanistan has been one of the poorest countries on Earth for the last 70 years. It's not because Afghans don't work. It's because the geography that protects them from invaders also chokes off everything else. The Soviets understood this. They didn't really want to conquer Afghanistan. They wanted a friendly government on their southern border that wouldn't let the Americans build air bases pointing north. The Americans, after 2001, didn't really want to colonize the place either. They wanted a stable government that would never again host Al-Qaeda. Both projects failed for the same reason. You cannot make Afghanistan into a centralized modern state by force, because the geography won't allow a centralized modern state at all. There is one strategy that has worked. Throughout history, the only foreign powers that built anything lasting in Afghanistan were the ones who didn't try to occupy it. The Silk Road empires, from the Persians to the Tang Chinese, ran trade routes through Afghanistan, paid the local tribes safe passage tolls, and got rich. The British, after their third failed invasion, eventually realized that paying off the Afghan king to behave was cheaper than ruling him. China is currently trying the same thing in 2026. Through the Belt and Road Initiative, China has been negotiating mining contracts for Afghanistan's lithium and copper, paying Taliban authorities directly, and building roads that connect Afghan mines to Chinese factories without trying to change a single thing about who runs the country internally. It's still early, but every empire that tried to occupy Afghanistan over the last 2,300 years failed. The ones that just traded with it built fortunes. The geography has not changed. The Hindu Kush hasn't moved. The Khyber hasn't widened. The plate underneath India is still shoving north at the same 40 millimeters a year, lifting the mountains higher every century. The same passes that broke Alexander still exist. The same valleys that hid the Mujahideen still exist. The same ethnic geography that splintered the British still exists. When the next great power, whoever they are, looks at the map of Asia and thinks about doing something about Afghanistan, they will be looking at the same map every previous empire looked at. They will see a small, landlocked country with a weak army, and they will assume it's a problem they can solve. They will be wrong for the same reason every empire was wrong before them. Afghanistan is not ungovernable. It is geographically impossible to occupy. Thanks for exploring with me. See you on the next map. If you want to see the river that 2 nuclear powers are quietly preparing to go to war over, and why both of them might lose either way, subscribe.